Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 10th of September 2015. And delighted to welcome back Alan Watt to the show. You there, Alan?
Yeah, I'm here, yep.
Yep, loud and clear. Okay, I wrote a short email to you, as usual, and it was concerning how today's society perceives old society and old cultures. And I wondered if the TV and the movies are trying to portray certain cultures in a certain way, so as people can say, well, you know, they deserve it. That's what they're like. You know, they're they're savages, or they're backwards peoples, or whatever. I mean, I suppose I was watching Vikings, and in that they're just totally portrayed as brutal savages. Every one of them's a psychopath. I mean, there was one scene where the guy just gets up and chops somebody's legs off just because he's sitting the wrong way, and things like that. And then I was thinking about Greece and how that's kind of transpired, and whether these types of societies, as they were in ancient times, the kind of warrior peoples, are being kind of goaded into reverting back to the way they were. You see some of the riots in Greece, and they've got dustbin lids, trash can lids, and batons. And if you saw them from a distance, you'd think they were ancient warriors with a shield and a sword. In terms of the way society is portraying them now, it seems to be making these people out, and right across the board. It doesn't matter what historical drama you watch. The ordinary people are savages, basically.
Yes, yeah. There's no doubt about it that the whole world, and through the same international educational system and its various formats of indoctrinations, have been dumbing everybody down across the planet since the days of John Dewey, where they talked about bringing in a rather kind of peasant-type society so that the elite could dominate and run the world what they called properly by experts and so on, has been going on for an awful long time. And you're seeing that this portrayal, always again through fictional movies and so on, as they try to debase different cultures down to some low common denominator of primitive peasantry that needs expert rule, you see. And lots of folk who watch this stuff their whole life long will adopt those particular viewpoints as well on the cultures. I've heard people even in Scotland saying, oh yeah, there's too many people, and yeah, blah, 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 which is utter trite, because the population of Scotland really was around 5 million at that time. And if you want a minority group, there's the Scots, and now they're almost gone altogether with the massive influx of European immigrants and African immigrants and so on. And so everything you see on TV and movies really is really it's lies, basically. It's propaganda, and it's really preparation and indoctrination as well, getting you ready for some other type of system being brought in. So, but as I say, the average person who watches TV all their life will actually adopt the opinions that are given to them, and take the elite's point of view, even though they're basically working class people. I've heard out their mouths too. Yeah.
In terms of that, I mean, I've never seen one of these kind of sword and sandal movies of old, and recent series or recent movies on the Romans being classed as barbarians. I've never seen one yet. They're always classed as the pinnacle of civilization, which fell apart because people got greedy and the too much sex and all the rest of it. But they're always portrayed as these noble warriors who went off and conquered places. I mean, it doesn't say they went off and slaughtered everybody.
Yeah. That's standard again, and for again in the European history books, which again catered. Remember, education for ordinary folk was a much later development, really for the industrial era, because they had to get basic reading and writing and basic arithmetic and so on, so that people could work in the factories and sort of work and manage the factories. If it wasn't for that, probably they would never have given you basic education unless your parents could afford to bring in a private teacher or something. That's how Robert Burns was taught, But basically, they never wanted the people at the bottom to get any education at all. And once they did give them education, in Europe and in Britain especially, at least Britain wrote about it, they had big meetings of the nobility and the aristocracy worrying about taking down or reducing the work hours from 16 or 17 hours per day in the factories down to and giving them a couple of hours extra for themselves, and the kind of mischief they might get up to if they started chatting to themselves, which could be compounded with problems for the elite's rule if you also gave them a basic education where they could actually transmit what they'd read about life, history, and so on, and societies, and they might eventually rebel. So there's a tremendous problem right up into the 1900s about this particular problem of giving basic education to the peasants, and that's what how they framed it, basically, the commoners, and what effect it would have on a stable society. That's never really changed. And then you've got the other groups too, the communist groups, elements that came in as well, which really worked towards the same goal of expert rule by an intelligentsia, run in a scientific fashion for society. So it's the same agenda that's gone together. These two roads really merge into one with the same goals, and that's why you see it all working out today on all sides and all parties.
I suppose in America we've got the native Indians, as it were, portrayed as well, and uneducated, illiterate, but of course they had their own language. Just because they didn't speak English doesn't mean they're illiterate, you know. That's
right. And also too, the problem again across Europe was it was standard for those who could afford education in universities and so on, but most folk could not. It was always an elitist thing. Was to be taught what they call classic history, which was based on Roman and Greek history, and they taught the Latin, they taught the Greek, in fact, right up into the year about the World War I, in most of these upper schools, and that's what they based their model of what civilization was. It was from the days of ancient Greece and so on. In fact, Asia and that they weren't mentioned at all in those teachings, and it was all Greek and Roman who brought civilization, especially the Roman part that took over from Greece, by conquering to unify what then was the ancient world. And that goal was always present amongst certain classes in the upper strata, of bringing in a world order again, you know, based on kind of Roman type order as well. And they always said that they went to civilize the world, didn't go to plunder it and to spread its tax base and so on, and resources. And it was always to bring civilization. And you'll find with the empirical ages of the colonizers of Europe, different countries, they had the same format, they used the same excuses. They never told you that the big merchant bankers were running the countries already and using your armies to go and plunder so that they and their own boys could get in there and get all the goods and raw resources and all the rest of it. So there's a tremendous hypocrisy in history, which is always covered in lies, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, go back to when I was a child, we always watched the latest Western movies and all the rest of it. And again, even the kind of the shopkeepers in the little towns there were semi-illiterate themselves, and there was always kind of the head guy in the town, whether it was a sheriff or somebody else, some corporate entity, was always there to denigrate everybody and say that we need to do this, we need to do that, and you just mind your place, kind of thing. And that was always how it was portrayed in the movies. And again later on, when the Indians were portrayed as alcoholics, savages. They were the ones doing all the scalping, and they deserved what was coming to them, which was, as you say, civilization. Mm-hmm. And that's what was portrayed. And if we bring it back into what's happening today in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, we see the same thing. This same game plan. Dehumanize the people that live there, even although you don't know who they are. You've never met them. You know nothing about them until you're told that they were, terrorists, and away you go.
Yeah, it's an old strategy again, very old strategy. But you always demonize the enemy regardless, and the Romans did the same thing until they had them, quote, civilized, and brought into the Roman Empire. Then they'd lift them up a bit to the extent in their history books. But you always call them barbarian, etc. Even though the Romans themselves were very paganistic had their own kinds of sacrifices too, and including sacrificing their own troops for King for the Day and all that, for the Mars celebration. So it's amazing how the hypocrisy involved with those who get paid, the mercenaries who go off to get paid to civilize other countries for the big merchant bankers of the day. And ancient Rome had the same problem. Ancient Rome was run really, it doesn't matter who was the figurehead in power, he was dependent upon the loans that he got too to manage his big empire and the massive armies and all the rest of it. There's a lot of history involved in that. And even had the merchant bankers, workers going off with the armies, and they managed all the payments, the weekly or monthly payments to the troops. They managed all the logistical supplies and all the rest of it, and it all went down and carefully written down all the rest of what was owed. And the Caesar, whoever happened to be, the emperor would go off and he'd meet with the lenders of the day. Yeah. So nothing's really changed from then to the present time. Yeah.
So when say people in Scandinavia watch a program like Vikings, they must have a better idea of their own history than the TV portrays. But do you think they actually take on some of the characteristics, or try to live up to those kind of characteristics that are portrayed on the television in the modern era?
The one country in the world where you'll see it emulated to an extent. I mean, remember, the whole culture idea is also fashion. It's fashion, music, and the whole culture industry, and the movies. And you'll see it's more prominent in the US. Who actually, you'll see the whole during the 70s, it churned out these different Dukes of Hazzard and all these different things. The guys with the tailor-made jeans where their genitals were so crushed that you could almost think that that's what their Adam's apple happened to be. The tight pants, the tight shirt, and the big hats and all that, acting like cowboys with big V8 engine cars and running moonshine. That's the image that was portrayed. We're free and we're wild and watches sort of idea. And so many Americans actually thought that all their ancestors were cowboys, which is nonsense, utter rubbish, because factory towns were taken from Europe by the same boys who ran them in Europe, and they set them up across the US, brought the immigrants in, shoved them into different mining towns and so on, factory towns, gave them the tokens. The guy who owned it had his own tokens for money, and you couldn't leave the damn place because you couldn't exchange them for dollars. You were stuck there. That didn't really change till World War One, So, but they don't know that. Their history's been given through Hollywood, and as I say, through Hollywood, they all think they were free and wild and can make their own destinies and all the rest of it. It's utter rubbish. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention the Dukes of Hazzard. I mean, I've actually seen some of those types of cars around here, the same paint jobs and everything, and presumably the same types of people driving them.
Mm-hmm. Or the wannabes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that culture here, that fast car culture, kind of drive like a maniac. I mean, we hear sirens down on the big highway down here, and there's a lot of accidents around here on the interstates and stuff. And it's just atrocious driving. They drive like they're in a movie, and it's no wonder. It's no wonder
they're trying to live a fantasy that never really was, But what's true too. I mean, most ordinary people